The burden of the temper in the heart of a valley where the air was sweet with the scent of pine and the river ran cold from mountain snowmelt. Lay a village known simply as Pahaganj, the mountain hamlet. The villagers here were a simple, hard-working people, bound by the rhythms of the seasons and the shared quiet of their ancient ways. Yet, amidst this tranquility, lived a man whose inner life was a constant, tumultuous storm, Rahim. Rahim was a farmer, strong of back and hand, a man who could coax life from the stony mountain soil. But his true reputation was built not on his harvest, but on his timber. It was a volatile, unpredictable thing, like a forgotten fire that could flare up from a single spark. It wasn't the heat of a moment that defined Rahim. It was the persistent, simmering rage he carried in his chest, a heavy, suffocating coat he wore every hour of every day. The slightest friction was enough to ignite him. If his wife, Amina, who moved through their small home with the quiet grace of a dove, failed to add sufficient salt to his simple evening meal, Rahim would erupt. "Is it so difficult?" He would bellow, his voice shaking the clay pots on the shelf. "Are your senses so dulled that you cannot manage the simplest of tasks? You waste my hard-earned food." Amina would simply lower her eyes, her shoulders drooping slightly, the shame of his outburst a familiar, wearying weight she carried for him. She knew it was never truly about the salt. If a stray calf wandered from the neighbor's field and clipped a few blades of his meticulously tended wheat, Rahim wouldn't just chase it away. He would scream insults at the poor, bewildered animal, and then carry his indignation to the neighbor's doorstep, launching into a bitter, accusatory tirade. His anger had made him a pariah. Children, sensing the dangerous heat radiating from him, would stop their games and scatter whenever they saw him approaching. "Can't you be quiet for one moment?" he had roared one afternoon at a group of giggling youths playing tag near his fence. The children fled, their laughter instantly silenced, replaced by the swift patter of their feet. Rahim stood there, breathing heavily, his victory a hollow, sour taste in his mouth. He genuinely believed the world was flawed, not him. Everyone else the careless neighbor, the silly children, the forgetful wife was responsible for disrupting the pristine order he demanded. His anger, he reasoned, was merely a justified response to the endless parade of incompetence and disrespect the world offered him. He failed to grasp the simple, devastating truth. He had outsourced his entire peace of mind. He had given every single person in Pahaganj, and every stray animal and every circumstance, a tiny, remote-control detonator wired directly to his happiness. Amina was the only person who still dared to speak to him about it, though her words were always soft, like attempts to soothe the fever. "Rahim," she would say, watching him pace after an argument, his jaw still tight, "why do you let small things make you so angry? Why do you give strangers the power to ruin your entire day?" He would invariably flare up at her concern, mistaking it for criticism. "Because people should learn how to behave. If they don't respect me, how can I stay calm? I am the master of my own house, and I will not be made a fool of." He saw her gentle suggestions as attempts to control him, failing to see that his rage was already controlling him completely. He was a puppet whose strings were tugged by the most minor annoyances. He was exhausting himself, and the deep, wrinkled furrows in his brow were now a permanent map of his lifelong struggle. The arrival of the stillness, the summer that followed a particularly harsh planting season, brought a strange and welcomed guest to Pahaganj. A monk arrived, walking into the village one quiet morning as if he had simply materialized from the mountain mist. He was a man of indeterminable age, wearing only the simplest of white cotton robes, which were slightly dusty from his journey. His face was remarkable, not handsome, but radiating a stillness that drew the eye. It was like looking into the depth of a very clear, calm lake. He did not announce himself. He merely chose a spot under the ancient, sprawling banyan tree near the village well and sat down. He closed his eyes and became a silent, unmoving fixture of the landscape. He spoke little, never asking for food or shelter, accepting only what the villagers offered. Yet his presence had an immediate effect. People spoke of him in whispers. "He speaks little," the women said as they drew water. "But when he does, his words touch the heart. His eyes hold no judgment," the men mused in the evening, only a quiet acceptance of everything. The monk became known as Bodhi, a name meaning awakening, though no one knew if it was his real name or a title bestowed by the odd villagers. One afternoon, Amina found Rahim brooding by the stove, muttering about the market prices. She approached him cautiously. "Rahim, I know you are tired of this constant agitation," she said. "Go meet the monk. Perhaps he can help you find a different path." Rahim snorted, an abrupt, dismissive sound. What will a monk teach me? He sits and meditates all day. He doesn't deal with fools and cheats like I do. He doesn't have a field to protect or a livelihood to worry about." He dismissed the monk as an impractical dreamer, someone insulated from the real pressures that justified his own frustration. But fate, as it often does, provided a catalyst stronger than pride. The very next day, the inevitable happened. Rahim was working in his field, meticulously turning the soil, when he heard a muffled snap. It was Govind, his neighbor's 12-year-old son, who had been tasked with collecting stray firewood. The boy, running carelessly, had tripped right over Rahim's prize, custom-made wooden plow tool, shattering the handle with a sickening crack. The world seemed to turn red for Rahim. All the tension, all the unexpressed daily irritations burst forth in a volcanic explosion. He lost control completely. He shouted so loudly, so ferociously, that the sound echoed off the surrounding hills. His voice was a raw, searing thing, full of venom and disproportionate rage. He didn't just scold the boy, he attacked his parents, his lineage, and his lack of manners, weaving a tangled knot of insults that went far beyond the broken tool. The boy, frozen for a moment in paralyzing fear, suddenly broke free and ran home, sobbing hysterically. Even the flock of white egrets feeding in a nearby paddy field took flight, startled into the clear blue sky. That evening, Rahim sat alone by the darkened hearth. The broken tool lay ignored in the corner. His chest was still tight, his hands still trembling slightly, but the consuming fire had retreated, leaving only a vast, cold emptiness. He had won nothing. The tool was still broken. The boy was terrified. His wife wouldn't meet his gaze. And he, Rahim, felt worse than anyone. "Why do I always end up feeling hollow and exhausted after shouting?" he whispered into the silent room. That night, he couldn't sleep. The monk's image, peaceful and still under the banyan tree, kept imposing itself over the mental replay of his own ugly outburst. Before the first hint of orange touched the eastern sky, Rahim rose, dressed in silence, and walked toward the village well. The first lesson, the cost of catching dirt. The monk, Bodhi, sat in the pre-dawn stillness, his back straight, his eyes closed, listening to the first tentative chirps of the waking birds. Rahim stood awkwardly a few feet away, unsure how to approach this vessel of calm. His own breath sounded ragged and loud in the quiet air. Finally, the monk opened his eyes. He didn't express surprise or recognition. He simply smiled, a soft, welcoming gesture. "Sit down," My friend, Bodhi said, his voice a low, resonant murmur, like water over river stones. The earth is cool now. Before the sun claims it, Rahim lowered himself stiffly onto the ground. The words spill out of him, a torrent of confession and despair. Master, he began, his voice hoarse, I am tired. Terribly tired. People make me mad. They constantly annoy me, and I cannot control myself. I feel like a furious animal, and I hate the man I become. But I don't know how to stop. Bodhi listened patiently, not interrupting or judging, merely absorbing the energy of the desperate admission. Tell me, Rahim, the monk asked gently when Rahim had finished, when someone insults you, or a cow breaks your tool, and the anger takes hold of you, how long does it stay? Rahim thought hard, tracking the memory of past explosions. Sometimes only an hour. Sometimes, if the disrespect was great, it can spoil an entire day. I carry the heat of it with me until I fall asleep, and when the anger finally fades, like the heat from a bonfire going out, how do you feel then? Bodhi pressed. Rahim sighed deeply, the sound heavy with resignation. Double quotes empty. Said, utterly tired. I feel shame for what I said, and foolish for having lost control over such small things. Exactly. The monk nodded, his eyes fixed gently on Rahim's. That is the fundamental cost. The anger burns the one who holds it, not the one it is aimed at. You spend your precious life force tending to a fire that harms only you. Bodhi reached for a small clay cup of water sitting beside him. It was perfectly still, reflecting the soft, muted colors of the sky. This water is calm now, he said, holding it steady. You can see the truth in it. You can see your own reflection. It is clear. Then, deliberately, he began to shake the cup rapidly, stirring the water into violent, churning agitation. Now, Bodhi said, stopping and holding the cup before Rahim. Can you see your reflection? Rahim leaned forward. The surface was a frenzy of ripples and shadows. No. Master, it is disturbed. I can see nothing clearly. The same happens with your mind. Rahim, Bodhi explained, returning the cup to the ground. When it is disturbed by rage, by reaction, you cannot see the truth of the situation. You cannot see the simple fact that a broken tool is just wood, and a small boy's clumsiness is just innocence. You only see the fury, which blinds you. Rahim frowned, processing the analogy. So, what am I to do? Should I just stay silent and swallow my pride when people insult me? Should I let them cheat me and walk all over me? The monk smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. No, my friend. You must learn to respond, not react. There is a massive, life-altering difference between the two. Bodhi picked up a piece of dry earth, crumbling it into a handful of fine, brown dirt. Imagine someone throws dirt at you, Rahim, he said, letting a tiny amount sift through his fingers. You have two choices. You can either catch it, hold it, study it, and then try to throw it back at them, thereby getting your own hands filthy and escalating the fight. He paused, letting the silence emphasize the alternative. Or, he continued, you can simply step aside and let the dirt fall to the ground. You have chosen peace, and you have not let their foolish act pollute your hands or your heart. The choice is always yours. Rahim, you are the only one who decides whether to catch the dirt. The second lesson. The settling of the sand. Rahim left the banyan tree that morning feeling a sensation he hadn't experienced in years, a tentative, fragile sense of hope. The monk's words respond, not react, and don't catch the dirt were simple, but their implications felt vast and terrifying. They demanded a complete overhaul of his identity. He spent the day in a haze, finding himself halfway to an angry retort several times, only to pull back at the last second, muttering the monk's phrases under his breath. He returned before sunrise the next day. Bodhi was waiting, a look of calm expectation on his face. Today, we look deeper into the nature of agitation, Rahim, the monk said. He instructed Rahim to bring a small metal pot of water and a handful of fine, gritty river sand. Rahim did as he was told, building a small fire and setting the pot on the glowing embers. Now, boil the water, Bodhi commanded. Rahim waited until the water was not just warm, but furiously bubbling and hissing, steam pluming into the cool morning air. "Can you touch it now?" Rahim, the monk asked, gesturing towards the churning pot. "Of course not, Master," Rahim replied, shrinking back. "It's far too hot. It would burn my hand instantly. That is the state of reaction," Bodhi stated, his voice even. "When your emotions are boiling, when the internal pressure is so high you cannot possibly touch peace, reason, or clear judgment. To act from this state is to guarantee a burn." The monk then took a spoonful of the sand and, without warning, dropped it into the pot. The sand immediately created a cloud of darkness, sinking and churning in the already agitated water. "That sand is the external annoyance," Bodhi explained. "The insult, the mistake, the injustice. It is always small. But look at what your agitation does. It mixes that small, external problem with your internal, boiling heat, creating a muddy and usable mess. Your mind is no longer pure water. It is dirty steam, and fit for life." Rahim watched the churning water, fascinated and repulsed by the vivid metaphor of his own mind. Bodhi then poured the boiling, sandy water into a clean, empty clay bowl. The result was a murky, opaque liquid. "If you try to drink that water now, it will choke you with the mud," the monk said. "This is what happens when you react instantly. You choke on the emotional dirt." They sat in silence. The fire crackled, the sun began to rise, and slowly, imperceptibly, the agitation in the bowl ceased. The fine grains of sand, once suspended in fury, began to settle. They drifted down until they formed a distinct layer at the bottom of the bowl. After a long time, the water above the sand was perfectly clear again, reflecting the morning light with serene purity. "This," the monk said, placing a gentle hand on Rahim's arm, "is what happens when you simply stop reacting. You don't need to fight the dirt. You don't need to try and scoop it out. You simply need to give your mind space. You allow the internal agitation to cease, and the truth the sand will settle to the bottom. Your mind clears, and you see life clearly again, without the muddy filter of rage." Rahim sat silently for a long moment, realization dawning like the full morning sun. He realized all these years he hadn't just been angry at the world. He had been boiling his own water, adding the sand himself, and then trying to drink the poison. He had believed that the only way to deal with the dirt was to fight it, when the only true power was in stillness.